Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am here with the former head lead, Mac Daddy, master hostage negotiator over at the FBI, who is now running the epically titled Black Swan Group and the author of one of the most influential books I've ever read in my life. It's literally in the top 10 list, called Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss, how's it going, brother?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
Chris, well, I wanted to have you on today because I am a big fan of your work personally, and I've watched, I think, or listened to every interview you've ever done on YouTube and your talk at Google. And you've talked a lot about negotiation. Obviously, Never Split the Difference is a fantastic negotiation book, but everything in that book and everything that I've heard you talk about has to do with negotiating with other people. But I have a question for you, because I think the most common negotiations that ever happen are negotiations with ourself. And I was wondering if you've ever done any work on that or have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all part of the process. What we're trying to do when we negotiate with others in my method is to get the person to think in certain ways because it's productive and it's effective. So yeah, we can absolutely do that with ourselves.
So can you give me an example, Chris, of, I know even it's funny because the psychological research actually uses hostage related terms like emotional or amygdala hijack.
Amygdala hijack.
And so let's talk about a very, very common example I'm sure we can all empathize with, which is, we know we shouldn't eat some sugary treat. We know it's not good for us. We're on a diet. We're trying to be healthy, but we have a really stressful day at work and we consciously know that we shouldn't do this, but then the amygdala hijack happens and we're like, oh, I have to eat this. How do we talk ourselves down from that experience?
Yeah, well, you're going through the same thing anybody goes through in any negotiation. You're trying to fix one chemical reaction in your brain with another. I mean, that's completely understandable. Food happens to be one way to trigger those chemical reactions. It's not the only way. The amygdala punches different chemical buttons in our brain. The negative part of the amygdala punches anxiety and gets in our way, and the positive part of the amygdala triggers releases of serotonin and dopamine. So, you know, we can practice. I mean, and it takes practice. And the first couple of times it's always hard. I mean, but understanding that the first couple of times it doesn't stay that hard the whole time. Any new practice, any new habit is hard the first time through because you're trying to build a new neural pathway in your brain. And it's hard going down that pathway the first time. It's hard building. It's like building a road in the snow. You got to clear the snow and build the road. Now, what we don't realize is it's not always that hard. So you only a couple of attempts and pretty soon it gets easier to go down that road. The bad habit, if you will, is a neural pathway that's already been built. That road's there, it's been plowed, it's smooth sailing. It's really easy to go shooting down that road. And we're going to take the path of least resistance early on. So what am I talking about here? We're trying to trigger release of positive chemicals in our brain because we're seeing a negative outcome. We've had a bad day at work. We're experiencing a sense of loss, if you will. Or we're framing what's happened to us as a glimpse into the future, and a glimpse of the future looks bad. So we can simply engage in a separate amount of self-talk, some of which is real simple. I mean, it sounds trite, but it's stupid. You know, the phrase gratitude that everybody loves all the time? Well, the mere act of saying you're grateful for something triggers positive emotions. It punches the buttons of serotonin and dopamine. It begins to release those into our system. At the same time, our mental capacity increases. Again, what am I babbling on about? In a positive frame of mind, your mental capacity is about 31% more effective. You can even do something stupid. And I pulled a lot of this from a book called The Upward Spiral, which is a phenomenal book. Same kind of stuff. Put yourself in an upward spiral. Same kind of application that we do the same stuff in a hostage negotiation. So knowing that you're in a more effective mentally in a positive frame of mind, they ran an experiment where they asked people to hold a pencil in their mouth, hold it in their teeth, and not touch it with their lips. A forced smile. Will the brain still react as if you're smiling, which triggers serotonin and dopamine, more positive frame of mind? If your muscles smile, but you don't know you're smiling. The answer was yes. I'm in a negotiation with someone I don't like. And while I'm doing the rehearsal for that negotiation in my head, I can't think of any good tactic, even though I know all the tactics and strategies. You know, what we refer to as labels, our bread and butter tactic strategy. I can't come up with any good labels. And then I stopped myself and I said, you know, I'm in this negotiation because we're successful. So in reality, I'm lucky to be having this conversation. Instantaneous mental frame of mind in my head. I was in a positive, I put myself in a positive frame of mind with that negotiation internally. And I immediately thought up great positive labels to use in the interaction. Just this stupidity of gratitude. You know, I'm lucky to be here at all. And bang, I was in a better frame of mind. It's a hard thing to say, but you had a bad day at work. On balance, if somebody didn't try to kill you that morning, you're probably someplace that overall you're fortunate to be. Now, maybe you're living in South Central LA where somebody might shoot you when you walk out the front door. But if you're not someplace that dangerous, a little bit of retool in your head and you have the ability to handle a lot more stress.
Well, Chris, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you'll notice I just say it sounds like, which of course I learned from you. And so it sounds like one of the step number one is we actually have to realize that we have an opportunity to negotiate with ourselves, because once we sort of understand, hey, I have this craving, I have this emotional drive and desire, and we can interrupt it, then we have an opportunity to, maybe what you said, practice gratitude. We have an opportunity to label it, which that's cognitive behavioral therapy 101. We have an opportunity to slow it down psychologically. So, but maybe the critical, how can, in that moment of passion, in that moment of excitement, in that moment of amygdala hijack, have you noticed in your, I mean, you're dealing with terrorists and the most emotionally charged situations ever. So no matter how much we want that pint of ice cream, it's probably not as emotionally intense as someone holding a gun to another person's head. How do we pattern interrupt so that we can even engage in gratitude and have that conversation with ourselves?
Right. And let me unpack what you said. And I'm going to put two different ideas in at the same time. The most dangerous negotiation is the one you don't know you're in, is the first idea. All right, so you don't have an opportunity to negotiate with yourself. You already are. It happened. If you look at it as an opportunity to negotiate with yourself, the bad news that I have for you is that you've already been negotiating with yourself. And if you're not aware of the negotiation you're already in, you're probably on the loser side. You were running a pattern already to start with. So now, what do we do with that? You fall to your highest level of preparation, your highest level of training. You know, you forget a little bit about this moment. Think about the moment in 5 minutes, because a moment in 5 minutes coming at you. So if you feel out of control now, it's like, all right, you know, screw it. I already blew this one. But there's another moment getting ready to come at me. Let me get ready for that. How do I get ready for that? Or in the moment where you're not doing a sugar craving. All right, so you gave in to the sugar craving. You centered your body chemistry out. You feel dirty. And now you're kicking your own butt for doing that, which is the downward spiral. That's why the book that I love to refer to that supports a lot of the negotiation stuff that in my book, The Upward Spiral, says, all right, look, let's just reset now. What's my highest level of preparation? Stupidly enough, you hear your own voice. When I get upset, if I talk out loud to myself in the late night FM DJ voice, the sound goes out of my mouth, goes around the corner, in my ears, back in my brain, triggers my mirror neurons, calms me down. That's why in many cases, talking out loud helps us. You know, and actually they say, you know, people that talk to themselves are more effective and smarter. Because when you talk out loud, you cause another mental interaction. The sound goes out, comes back in another portal, triggers your brain in another way. You don't talk out loud, you don't kick your brain in that fashion. So when I'm upset and I'm seeking a sugar craving, if I haven't practiced calming myself down with the late night FM DJ voice, as soon as this craving's over, next time I'm going to practice it, because that craving's coming back at me again in the future. Let me practice for it. Next time it comes at me, bang, I'm prepared. I'm falling to my highest level of training. Maybe I blew it now, but I'm going to be ready for it next time.
So speaking of falling to your highest level of training, let's impromptu this, if you don't mind. Let's say that, Chris, you just had a severe craving of some kind and you blew it and you did something you didn't want to do. What would you, Chris Voss, do for yourself to train you to react differently in the future?
All right. So then I'm like, where do I want to be tomorrow morning? Where do I want to be tomorrow afternoon? How can what I do tonight, this afternoon, sets up where I'm going to be tomorrow? How can I anticipate this problem coming at me? What are the interim steps I can take along the way? Like, one of my real big ones is to get a good night's sleep. You're not supposed to eat 2 hours before bedtime. I'm always hungry about an hour out. I want to consume some protein. It's going to make me feel good. Protein's a healthy thing. Problem is that protein bar, no matter how healthy it is in and of itself, if I knock it down a half an hour before I go to bed, it's going to interfere with my night's sleep. I'm not going to be as rested. I'm not going to be as effective tomorrow. If I gave into it, which I do, next time around, I'm thinking like, all right, simple mindset shift. Where do I want to be tomorrow? How good do I want to feel tomorrow? Start asking myself some open-ended questions. Transfers my brain to how I want to feel tomorrow. These are time travel questions that you can ask yourself. Put yourself in a time travel mode, you now have more of an opportunity to cope with the coming problem. Exact same negotiation I would have with somebody else when I would say in a business setting, where do you want to be tomorrow? How do you want to be prepared for it? What do you want to be able to give your family in a year? I love that question, because a lot of times people won't negotiate on their on their own behalf really well, but they're killers on behalf of their family. So let me not take better care of myself for my own sake. Who do I want to be for my kids in a year? What do I want to be for them? Negotiate on your kids' behalf. You can do the same thing with yourself.
Chris, and if we were to, let's raise the stakes a little bit. So certainly you've had the stakes raised with you on numerous occasions. We've talked a little bit about sugar cravings, but certainly we're seeing a lot of research that is showing some of these quote unquote cravings borderlining more on addiction. So let's take it extreme here. If you were dealing with, let's say, someone who was addicted to heroin, obviously the most addictive substance in the world, could a heroin addict negotiate with themselves to help overcome arguably the most severe of all addictions?
Yeah, it's not going to hurt. And I don't want to poo-poo or short shift the difficulty of a lot of these drugs where chemical dependency is huge. But I do know the people that are beating them with visions of the future. And I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. I mean, he wants to lock people in on what the future is going to look like for themselves and their kids if they continue in the same habit. What are the success rates? Success rates in any addiction are always tough. And there are all kinds of addictions. I mean, heroin is a chemical change in the body, triggers a chemical change in the body. The brain is capable of comparable chemical changes. It's just building those habits and, getting over that wall initially is really hard. I mean, I think there's some people that would, endorphin junkies, running junkies. I mean, these people run, when they get addicted to endorphins, they're as desperate for those endorphins as a lot of other chemical dependencies are. So sometimes also it's a matter of what are you addicted to? Societally, we're pretty rough on people who are addicted to illegal drugs. Other people that are addicted to adrenaline, endorphins, they can be as hard to get along with as anybody else. Those drugs just happen to come from inside and don't happen to be illegal. So there's lots of different kinds of addictions. Some of it is, if you can get a firm picture of a vision of the future in your head, one of the best ways to get something like that under control, or an additional method. Because it's probably going to take several things. There's never any one solution to any problem. It's usually 2 or 3 answers together. So your vision of the future is going to play a role in your ability to overcome any addiction.
You mentioned it could take multiple tactics, and 2 of the tactics you talk about in great detail in your book, Never Split the Difference, which literally everybody needs to go out and buy right now and read. It's phenomenal, is slowing things down and labeling. So you already talked about one way of slowing things down with ourself, which is speaking in the late night FM DJ voice out loud. Can we talk about slowing things down and labeling our thoughts?
Yeah, good question, and a real subtle nuance in there. Because in the way I teach labeling, the way hostage negotiators learn it, the way people who are really in crisis intervention learn it is, for example, you sound upset. That seems simple. Actually, it's an extremely well-constructed dialogue. It's not, what I hear is that you're upset. The words I and you trigger the brain in yourself or the person being spoken to in very different ways. You're much more effective when you can say to yourself, you can do this, you have this, you got this, you got the strength for this. You could also say the same thing to yourself, like, I got this, I can do this, I have the strength for this. The I version of that is not as powerful as the you version is. So when you're talking to yourself, you should talk to yourself as if you're talking to somebody else. You're more effective when you say, you got this, you can handle this, as opposed to, I have this, I can handle it. There's a difference in the way the words I and you speak to your brain. And the you in this context is more powerful. So you're going to self-label when you feel upset, when you feel tension. You want to say to yourself, you feel tension, don't you? It's a more powerful way of speaking to yourself. It also hits the part of the amygdala that dials the tension down. And the brain science backs it up. They've actually monitored the electrical activity in the portion of the amygdala that controls all those negative thoughts. And they know that self-labeling works every time on negative thoughts. Now, there's a distinction there in what I said. I didn't say how much it works. You could self-label, and it might not make all the fear and anxiety go away. That just means you need to do it a couple of more times. You need a couple more doses. Doesn't mean it was ineffective. It just means you need a few more doses to get back under control.
And then how do it seems like in order to label, we have to have the space to label. So if we get home and we're in panic mode and we immediately rush to the fridge, or we rush to whatever our vice is, we don't have a chance. We don't have an opportunity to label. So have you found any techniques with yourself or with people you've worked with in these self-negotiations to give ourselves that opportunity to label, to take a step back, to change our mindset?
All right, grandma's wisdom, mom's wisdom. Some of it, as stupid as it sounds, as trite as it sounds, actually very effective. You know, the old saying, take a deep breath. Well, it triggers a couple of chemical reactions in the body, helps relieve tension. Also, the thing of taking a deep breath is, it's a moment, take a moment. What's a moment? 3 seconds. There's actually data out there that shows us that a moment is 3 seconds. Our brain works so fast and is capable of smoothing us out so quickly if we begin to hit the right buttons, that a moment may be enough. If it's not enough this time, we'll have a recollection that it helped a little bit. Maybe next time you fall to your highest level of training, we're capable of pulling 1 moment for ourselves out last time. Next time, let's double it. Give me 2 moments. You fall to your highest level of training. Certain amount of repetition, building that habit, building that neural pathway. Not very long, you got things back under control. You just got to allow yourself to get just a little bit better each time and then suddenly you'll hit the breakthrough. The neural pathway will be built. How many times did it take to build a neural pathway? Interestingly enough, there's data for that too. About 66 tries, which is why people often say, if you can stick with a habit for 21 days, it'll become part of your unconscious competence. You don't even have to try that many times a day to get 66 reps in 21 days. So a little bit of persistence, it'll get a little easier every time. And before long, 21 days or less, and you'll have it.
I love that you use the term repetition there, because I feel like we're almost designing a mental exercise routine here. And I feel like you've outlined, like, step one, the warm up is take a deep breath, give yourself that moment. I don't know if I'm going to get the order right here, but we need to do a little bit of positive reframing. Then we might do we may speak out loud to slow it down. We may label. What else would we put in that exercise routine that we want to repeat up to 66 times?
Yeah, you do those things when you start to show off with other people and yourself, you begin to realize that every positive has a flip side negative. Every negative has a flip side positive. The one reason for practicing the simplicity of the design of the labels is once you get the obvious ones, you want to show off to yourself and others, you start labeling the flip sides. Let's say, for example, the Golden State Warriors just won the NBA championship with a stacked team. Let's say you hate the Warriors. So, and you got silly reasons for it. They bought their players. You love Kevin Durant, but you hate that he left his old team. So you can label as negatives, or you could say, you know what? I love loyalty. I love people who stick together. I love teams that build themselves from the ground up and have great coaching, which is really, if you want to be fair to the Warriors, before they got Durant, that's what they did. They got great coaching and they got a great organization. Without taking any value judgments on either one of those are just examples of your positives and your negatives. Once you start getting good at labeling, you start looking for the flip sides, then you really give yourself the ability to have tremendously powerful influence over yourself and over others.
Speaking of over others, one question that because I've shared a bit of what I've learned from your book in our various communities, and one common objection I get is the principle that is, again, so sound in your book, never split the difference, is slow it down. And I found that to be personally the most effective of all the tactics you outline, even for dealing with myself. Just slow it down. However, when, for example, you're trying to get your kids ready for school in the morning and the bus comes in 5 minutes and there is a hard deadline and the kids are like, I don't want to do X. I don't want to eat this healthy thing. I just want this sugary nonsense garbage. I mean, you definitely have talked about how you can negotiate with your family, you can negotiate with children, you can negotiate with your spouse, you can negotiate with yourself. But how do you slow it down when the clock says that's impossible?
Yeah, well, great question. To instinctively feel that slowing it down is going to save time is really hard. Reality is, the faster you go, the less efficient you become. And it's a little bit like, look, my car's stuck in the mud. All I need to do is hit the gas a little harder so the wheels go faster. Once you start spinning your wheels, it doesn't matter how fast you go. You only get unstuck by stopping all movement of the wheels and trying to get some traction. It's the same thing when you're up against a clock that's pounding down on you and people are not cooperating. I feel that a lot myself. My self-talk is, you've got plenty of time if you don't waste it. I get myself focused on the task at hand. I begin to see the steps I have to make, and I begin to see what's going to happen up to the deadline. The other way we really take ourselves hostage is, the bus is coming to get your kids. In your brain, you're saying like, oh my God, if we miss the bus, it's going to be a disaster. I don't know what I'll do. This turns into, this outcome is completely unknown. And the unknown is the single greatest stressor. Traumatic stress is when the outcome is unknown and we don't know when it's going to be resolved. A combination of two things. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how long it's going to take. The fear of the unknown is the single greatest stressor. If you could even say to yourself, oh my God, instead of, oh my God, we're going to miss a bus, like, if I miss a bus, I'm going to have to drive the kids. I'm going to be late for work. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. As soon as you got a plan, you might not like the plan, but any plan, then no matter how distasteful it is, removes the unknown, because then you've got a path to go out. And sometimes the unknown, even if it's as horrible as it could possibly be, it's the way samurais used to deal with death. They used to say to themselves, I could die. Okay, that's a possible outcome. I had a man I coached in a kidnapping in the Philippines. He negotiated his brother out. He was a superstar in the negotiation. I was stunned at how well he took the coaching. And afterwards, I only knew half the story, and I talked to him about it. And he said, well, early on, I said to myself, my brother could die. It's going to be out of my control if he does. I could do my best. My brother could die. And he said, as soon as I said that to myself, actually the whole process, I was able to manage it. And so I don't know why you think I did so well, but I think that was part of it. Some of it is this outcome that we're horrified at. We just say to ourselves, could happen. We could miss the bus. And even just recognition that it could occur actually now settles you down a little bit, because it's an outcome. It's an outcome.
That distinction of settling yourself down, I think, is really transformational in this context, because if what I hear you saying, if I'm hearing it correctly, while it may be 7:55 and the bus comes at 8 o'clock and we can't change that, I think most people would agree that themselves hyped up with adrenaline coursing through their veins is going to perceive 5 minutes very differently than themselves relaxed with a more, let's say, accurate view of what could happen. So while we may not be able to change the actual clock time in a hard deadline situation, we can change ourselves, which then may change our perception and ability to act in that fixed time period.
Exactly. It's our perception of what we can get done and our vision of the outcome. Like if your vision is like, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to be able to cope with it. That's all unknown. As opposed to, yeah, it could go really bad. This could happen. I'm going to have to cope with it. Is just facing it head on and going like, yeah, this is a possibility, gives you more ability to cope in the interim and be effective.
Chris, you mentioned one of the things you did when you were leading up the hostage negotiation team at the FBI is you had to train other people. When people read your book, they'll certainly hear lots of excellent stories, and many of them are not you necessarily doing the negotiation firsthand, but training people on how to do negotiation. Now, have you ever worked with someone, because I could imagine people watching this interview, listening to this interview and saying to themselves, this is all well and good, but you know what? I can't do this. I've failed so many times in the past that, that was a wonderful conversation Chris and Jonathan had, but I just can't do it. Have you ever had a conversation or tried to train somebody who was like, Chris, I hear what you're saying, labeling, slowing it down. I want to do this, but I don't have the confidence in myself to execute on what you're telling me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because really what I was as the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator, I was an international coach. I'd show up in countries, I'd find somebody to coach through the negotiation. I didn't have to learn the language. I didn't even have to learn the industry, if you will. I just need to know how human brains work. And I got to find somebody who's either good at taking coaching. If I don't have anybody that's good at taking coaching, I got them to get good anyway. I did a lot of reverse psychology stuff. If I was faced with somebody who said, I can't do this, I can't follow your guidance, I'd say, perfect. Keep doing exactly what you're doing right now. I love it. I want you to be scared. I want your brain to be scattered. I want you to be unorganized. I want you to just be completely all over the place. I don't want you to listen to anybody. And what that does, again, it's zipping in the ear, it's hitting their brain, it's triggering an intentional reaction inside their brain. We're afraid of fear, and it overcomes us. And someone says to us, good, more fear, give me more fear. The fear goes away instantly. You're like, what? Wait a minute, what? I'm fine. What are you trying to get me to do? People become really rational really quickly. So if I was coaching somebody that said, I can't do this, if they're manifesting fear to me, I would say, I love that. That's perfect. Keep it up. I want more of that. And a part of their brain will take over. The prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain, will automatically come back into charge then. So if you feel like you can't do it, if your amygdala is hijacking you, get the other part of your brain to say to the amygdala, give me more, give me more. And the amygdala will be like, what? No, I'm not giving you what you want. I'm going to stop it right now. So there's some reverse psychology involved. You can make it work.
That really reminds me, Chris, of a technique. I mean, it's one of the things that I liked most about your book is a story you start out with where you go to Harvard and you've got these individuals who have all of the book smarts in the world. And they've just like, I know this from an intellectual perspective. And you go and you just put them on their back and they don't know what to do. And at some point in time, it wasn't like you just had so much practice and so much experience in the real world that you could take all these intellectual theories and you just said like, look, and it's pretty awesome to see that. And it's so much of what I hear you saying does have roots in such deep psychological research. I mean, what I just heard you said, it sounds a lot like a concept called paradoxical intention that Dr. Viktor Frankl talks a lot about, or the backwards law, which is, when he would see patients who had a hard time speaking in public and they were very nervous, he would say, try to be nervous. Because if you try to be nervous, somehow your body counteracts that. Do you have insights into why that happens? These days, I haven't stumbled over a book that explains that yet. And now that we're getting a neuroscience, I suspect that it's just pulling what we refer to as the prefrontal cortex back in charge in a reverse psychology sort of way. I know that the CEO of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, interacts with the limbic system, which is where the amygdala is housed, a couple of other Latin sounding components that I mispronounce all the time. But you're trying to trigger an intentional interaction and you're trying to trigger different chemical doses in the brain. And, there's 3 times as much real estate in the amygdala devoted to negative thoughts as positive thoughts. So often, instead of trying to override the negatives with positives, as opposed to overriding them, we find ways just to dial down on how the negatives are being pushed out. And what you're talking about strikes me very much as a way just to get the negative side of the amygdala to stop pouring out so much negativity, as opposed to trying to override it. Let's just choke it off. One of the things that I think is so exciting about your work, and again, your book, Never Split the Difference, Chris, is in some ways negotiation. I remember when I was younger, there was a movie that came out, I believe it was with Helen Hunt and possibly Mel Gibson, called What Women Want. And it was, Mel Gibson somehow gets the ability to hear what women think in their head and is then able to, react differently because he can look inside people's minds. So there's a moral question of, should he be controlling people? Now, it seems when we hear these stories in your book that someone who is a master of negotiation is essentially a master of getting other people, or even themselves, to do exactly what they want. But here's my question. For people who are negotiation masters, it seems like these people would be, whatever we want to characterize as successful the most successful people in the world because they can get people to do whatever they want on some level. So as one of the premier negotiators in the world, who probably knows other premier negotiators in the world, do you see a correlation between people's ability to negotiate and just worldly success? If yes, why? If no, why?
Absolutely. This is it. This is an intentional application of emotional intelligence. And the data out there shows us that very consistently the top performers at all levels are the ones with the most emotional intelligence. And in many cases, some cases, I don't know that anybody has it naturally. I think because it's learnable, it's buildable. There's a lot of data. EQ, emotional intelligence versus IQ. Doesn't matter how much chess you play, you're never going to raise your IQ level. It's like your height. You're only going to get so tall. You can diminish it, but I always wanted to be 6'7" and be an NBA player. Never made it, no matter how badly I wanted it, no matter how much milk I drank. EQ, on the other hand, is insanely powerful and nearly unlimited in our ability to continue to build that capacity. And what you allude to, there's even an article out there that was, I think Adam Grant wrote it, who's also another brilliant writer. Read anything he's written. And he talked about the dark side of emotional intelligence. Because people who can practice it in a very sociopathic way do it because it's insanely effective. It's the simplest, fastest way to be effective. So yeah, there's a dark side of emotional intelligence. Use your powers for evil and not for good. Oprah Winfrey's emotional intelligence is through the roof, and she clearly is using it for good. She's built a wonderful business. She's a global brand, and she does nothing but leave prosperity in her wake and leave everybody's life she touches better off. And I think that she's probably one of the greatest practitioners of emotional intelligence. Look at how many people she interviewed on her show and how many people came back and how many difficult situations she dealt with. So it's a little bit of, yeah, it is insanely powerful. You can't change whether or not it's powerful. You can only change how you use it.
Totally different track here, Chris. But something I had written in my notes, so I want to make sure we get to before we run out of time. And that is, we talked about slowing it down. We talked about slowing it down in negotiations with other people and also negotiations with ourselves. It does seem like there is quite a bit of research that shows that meditation is almost like a steroid of sorts to enable us to have the ability to slow it down. What do you think about that?
I am absolutely convinced of the usefulness of that, and that may be the new wonder drug, the new wonder coping mechanism. I mean, more and more people that I'm running across that are superstar high performers are coping with some sort of meditation, and in various doses. And the stupidity of it is, I know how true that is, and so far I'm practicing it minimally myself. But the meditation seems to be the one great thing. People are actually even rewiring their brain in some ways, in very healthy ways. And now again, the brain science is starting to show that that's never been done before. The ability to monitor the activity in the brain, how the electrical activity with the fMRIs and seeing the functionality of it. I mean, it's kind of insane what the gains that people are starting to make with meditation, even minimal amounts of meditation.
And there's a fascinating, I don't know if it's a paradox, but it's something that I've observed but never really crystallized in your work until this conversation. And that is, I think when some people may be hearing this interview or watching this interview, slowing it down, you may get an idea of, we're talking about meditation, of the Dalai Lama or something, very, very slow, very calm. And then we were talking about assertiveness. And when people read your book, you'll hear comments like, how am I supposed to do that? And what seems like very blunt, not aggressive, but it's an assertive statement. It's a polite way of saying no. So is what we're talking about here a superpower where you take two seemingly opposing forces, like a calm, contemplative, meditative state, plus assertiveness, and combine those together in a unique way?
1,000%. 1,000%. I am assertive. That's why I use empathy, so I can be assertive. I don't use empathy so I can give in. I use empathy because it gives me the ability to be assertive. And, you know, it's almost a 2 millimeter change. Great example of it is a friend of mine here in Los Angeles, Cindy Mori. And I was an Oprah fan before I met Cindy. Cindy was Oprah's booker for 17 years. And I was talking with her, and she said that she found out that her reputation in the industry was being straightforward. No, not straightforward, a straight shooter. Now, that didn't mean anything to her offhand, but I said, wait a minute, here's the difference. This means you're honest in an emotionally intelligent way. This means you tell people the truth in a way that they could hear it. You're not talking with you is not like getting hit in the face with a brick. When someone is so blunt with us, they tell us the truth that we hate the way it's told to us. But she's the type of person that is both empathic and assertive at the same time. And so you definitely want those things combined, because we need people around us to tell us the truth. We need to be able to tell ourselves the truth. The real issue is, have we told it in a way to them, in a way that respects them as a human being, takes their feelings into account? And that's the difference between someone who's seen as a straight shooter and someone who's seen as a jerk.
And there's a wonderful story in your book, Never Split the Difference, where I think you illustrate that very well, which has to do with your ruby red car, or your emerald. You describe it in a very creative way. And
now, let me interrupt, because the color is salsa red pearl.
Oh, okay.
Huh?
There it is. So
how does that sound?
That's beautiful. I love that. Salsa red pearl. And when folks pick up a copy of your book and read it or listen to it, I have actually done both. They'll hear, if you were to just read a transcript of this negotiation, you know, you lay it down, you know, when I heard it, I said, you know, Chris, excuse my language here, but you know, he did that without being a dick. And, you know, I think that's like, even when we talk to ourselves, sometimes our talk to ourselves is just so mean, and we can talk to ourselves, we can be assertive without being jerks to ourselves, like you did with your salsa red pearl automobile.
Yeah. You know, I told the guy the truth. You know, I was very honest with him. I did, because I know it works. You know, I took away all the guys leverage. I took it away by simply stating it, you know, and stating things do incredible things, not making a judgment on it one way or another. You know, the way I knocked him down on a price, I knew his argument was going to be, it was a beautiful truck. I loved this truck, that it was rare. I couldn't get it anyplace else. And it was actually a bargain at that price. So I said, it's a beautiful truck. I love the truck. It's rare. I can't get it anywhere else. It's a bargain at that price. I can't pay that price. How am I supposed to do that if I can't pay it? And he you know, I remember the guy just like, it made him like a little dizzy because he didn't know what to say, because I said it already. It completely took the wind out of his sails. So yeah, you know, there was no argument. I told the guy what he was going to tell me, and I said, in spite of that, I still can't do it. I was respectful. I was appreciative, and I got him all the way down to my price. I never offered. I bid him down. He came down about 7 times before he came to my price.
So it sounds like you didn't split the difference.
Did not split the difference.
Well, on that note, Chris, I could certainly, I could speak with you for 8 hours, but I know your time is very valuable. So in closing here, I think you've provided a tremendous amount of value and insight to our listeners and our viewers, but where can they go and how can they get as much Chris Voss as possible?
All right, keys to the gateway. The gateway is through our negotiation newsletter. You get not just Chris Voss, but you get the whole Black Swan team. The newsletter comes out once a week. It's called The Edge. Quickest, easiest way to subscribe to it is text the word FBI empathy. Make it all one word. You know, don't let your spell check correct it into 2 words. And send that FBI empathy, one word, to the number 22828. And it's 22828. And it'll trigger back and ask you to sign up for the newsletter, put your email address in. You get stuff out of us, short, sweet, digestible, one digestible article a week. You don't get an encyclopedia out of us or 7,000 choices to make. It also keeps you up to speed on where we're doing special negotiation trainings, how you can find out about that. And it's a gateway to the rest of our training on our website. Some we charge for, some is free. The newsletter is free. And the website is blackswanltd.com. Black like the color, swan like the bird with one L. LTD like limited.com. And we've got a bunch of stuff there also. We want people to have better lives.
Chris, there's no question, I speak from personal experience, that learning what you teach and what you've practiced in the real world, in the most impactful contexts imaginable, which I love because there's so many theoreticians out there, but there's so few people that actually put it into practice, and you've done it on the highest of levels. So I would strongly recommend everybody pick up a copy of Never Split the Difference, listen to it, read it, do both, and then go to blackswanltd.com. Definitely surprise. It's not a surprise. Definitely subscribe to Chris's newsletter. I am a subscriber. I'd strongly recommend you are as well. Chris Voss, thank you so much for your time today, brother. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.